it has to start with you. And it's hard, right? This we're talking about self-sabotage.
And when you look at somebody after years of their behavior, you start to find that there is this pattern where they're literally just going around in a circle.
And it's not just a substance and whether it's sugar or drinks or drug, it can be behavior which is patterned behavior.
Welcome to the Blue Mind Podcast.
A vision to transform the lives of 1 billion men.
We explore various topics related to male identity.
And we invite people here to discuss important issues that affect men in today's society.
Winston, new pad. How's it going?
How's it going, guys? It's really good. I have a new place here, so it's really nice. And I haven't got my proper setup yet, so I've just chucked a couple of lights around, and hopefully you can see me.
Yeah, I can see you, and I can see a new addition to the band as well. Perhaps you'd like to introduce the fourth member or guest appearance.
Do you want to present yourself?
Marcus. My name is Marcus.
Hey, Marcus.
Nice to meet you, Marcus.
And Marcus, who are you?
I'm an 11-year-old boy.
And who are you sitting next to?
In my apartment.
It's all good. Well, great to see you, and thanks for joining us. I think it's it's important that the last conversation that we had, gentlemen, was around fatherhood, and this is a very good example about the honesty and transparency that we're talking about. Ed's very excited about his little Christmas tree that he's bought, and on that note, we're a few weeks out now for Christmas, so hope everyone's preparation is going well, and going to pop out and get the tree this afternoon. Yeah. What about you guys? What are you? Have you put any decorations up? Or I suppose you've been super busy, haven't you?
I've been super busy. Moved in here I got the keys on the 1st of November while I was at work. I think I moved in on the 5th. First day I slept here was on the 5th. So yeah, no, it's really, everything's up in the air right now. Got some lights, which I haven't put up. We haven't got any Christmas decorations just yet. And I'm kind of, I'll probably wait until next year to really go full on with Christmas decorations. So
I get it, Winston. I did a very similar thing. I was explaining to Ed before we jumped on the call that for the first 2-3 years post separation and this new life that you're leading, it just didn't. I was in a flat, and it didn't really have the space for a tree or decorations. And you spent 10 years buying decorations, and then you don't see them. You think, oh, do I want to go out and buy all the decorations again? But I think today is the day. I'm going to take the plunge, get a tree, and create a bit of an atmosphere, a Christmas atmosphere to the boys.
It's all about the kids. It's all about the kids.
It's all about the kids.
Yeah.
It's all about the kids.
Next year I've invited all my family over, my sisters, my brother, and everyone over to Christmas. So next year's going to be a completely different situation.
Awesome. Where's our invite?
I'm still recovering from your mum's birthday video dancing. There's a lot. It was almost pump and grind, is how I would describe it. There was a bit of grinding going on there, and they were all family members, which is entirely inappropriate.
I thought it was really cool. We had this 360 camera thing which goes around.
It was wicked. It
was really cool, actually.
Yeah. Did you have some rum? Talking of self-sabotage.
Rum punch, of course, is a West Indian birthday, so there was some rum punch, lots of beer, and yeah, it was a really nice party. The only problem was the snow came down the same day, and a lot of people got snowed in. So I think about 20 people couldn't make it because they were snowed. Up in Yorkshire, there's a lot of hills. They couldn't get out.
Yeah, I bet.
Definitely. Well, Ed's just alluded to the fact what the topic of conversation is, and this is episode 3 of the Blue Mind podcast. Winston, Ed, Marcus, and myself, Mark. Last time, gents, we spoke about fatherhood, topic that's extremely deeply passionate. We're all passionate about this one. This one as well is very close to the heart. And what I mean by that is, for me personally, having realised the behaviours over 10-15 years, then trying to do something about it. So what we're looking to do here, we'll jump straight into it, and we're going to talk about our own experiences of self-sabotage, what it we define that, and then what we've done over the last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, however long, to improve on that, and how we're helping other people as well that come to us with similar problems. Does that sound okay?
Yeah,
Brilliant.
sounds great.
Awesome. Edward, let's start with you this week, because last time it was Winston. What's your definition of self-sabotage?
Great question. Well, great question. So, I mean, just to define it, I would define self-sabotage as any action that you partake in that you feel is giving you a net negative outcome, or people around you that is net negative. So it's doing something or behaving in a way that ultimately is not a positive in your life. And we'll go into what kind of things they could be. That could be, well, we'll go into that in a minute. But I think the one of the key things around self-sabotage is that you often don't know you're doing it at the time that you're doing it. And the main thing with learning about self-sabotage, and the first thing to say is that we all do it in different ways, and we still do it.
Definitely.
And the key issue here is very much around being aware of your patterns of behavior, that when you start to do something, you realize maybe in your gut, in your heart, in your head, that this is becoming a problem for yourself or your loved one. So have you got anything to add to that, Winston, in terms of how you would see it or define it?
What I might add to that is maybe, because there's different reasons why people self-sabotage, right? And I think one of them is when you're afraid of what's going to happen when you achieve the thing that you're trying to achieve. And if you're afraid of making your life different, so if you make it difficult to achieve that thing, so nothing actually changes, then it's kind of self-sabotaging in that way, right? It's a fear of something new. So I'm going to do everything I can to stop this from happening, unconsciously sometimes.
Yeah, and also maybe a fear of success is also can be as damaging as a fear of failure, which I think is kind of interesting. So this is not just about, putting things in your body which is bad for you, or behaving in a way which is bad for you, but it's actually maybe more of a wider behavioral pattern of actually doing things to not get you to the places you kind of maybe have got the potential to get to, because you're afraid of change, which is a slightly different way to how I was thinking of it. Have you got anything to add on how we define what it is?
So for me, it's a mixture of both. So and as you mentioned, Ed, we'll talk a bit more about our own individual experiences and different forms of self-sabotage. But when I hear that term, it's very much about, and similar to Winston touched on this, it's unconscious behavior. It's an act that you do to seek a form of comfort, instant gratification that doesn't serve you long term. So, for example, of that is binge drinking, substance abuse, gambling. Those are the three main ones for me, and we'll go on to that in a bit more detail. So it's a case of identifying the triggers, realizing that these things is all around instant gratification, and just being more conscious of it. And we'll talk about how we've done that and give some examples. Yeah. I mean, we could probably it's such a long list, isn't it? It's such a long list. I mean, again, so you can sabotage your life, you can sabotage your success by so many different forms of behavior. And it's not just a substance and whether it's sugar or drinks or drug or any other kind of addictive type thing. Behavior can not just be addictive. It can be behavior which is patterned behavior, which can be nothing to do with putting substances in your body. So whether that is, for example, creating drama in relationships, and that's one that I think a lot of people do, is when they're feeling emotionally isolated. Some people develop a pattern of creating drama or reacting very instantaneously to things in a very hurt and emotional way, which in turn then creates more drama, which actually makes you feel extremely bad about yourself. And this is a characteristic that I try and tame, is when I feel hurt, I react very quickly without pausing, and actually all it does is hurt me. So, and that's sabotaging relationships. Sure.
So I think it's a very big discussion. We haven't got too long to talk about it, but I guess we start with from our own experiences
when did we discover we were doing things, and how now do we know when we're doing things that are not doing us any favors?
Definitely. Winston, let's start with you then.
Yeah.
And to paraphrase Ed's question, it's what actions or behaviors did you take that you see as self-sabotage? Can you talk us through that? And then what was the point that you realized that? And then what did you do about it to improve? So that's three different questions there for you.
So I think for myself, I have a hard time pointing out any specific things that have been really detrimental, but I do have sort of daily things which are, if I try to get into some kind of a diet, if I try to eat properly, or I try to wake up at specific times, and it's like, for example, over the last few years, I found out waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning for me is perfect, and I get all my stuff done in the morning. I found out that eating the right foods in the morning gives me a clear head, and I found all these strategies that work for me. And sometimes when I don't do them, I would almost put that in the unconscious self-sabotaging. And I can't explain why I'm doing it, because I know if I behave in a certain way, if I train in the morning, if I wake up at 5 o'clock, if I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, all these things. So I think they're not detrimental things, or they haven't been detrimental for me yet. But it's just a case of, I know that my life is better when I live like this. And unconsciously, I'll have the extra chocolate bar, which is fine, but I'll do it at a time which really messes up my flow in the day. And, what do I do about it? I think as soon as I feel myself getting too far away from the structure that I know works for me best, and the daily routine that works for me best, is I will focus on one thing and just focus all my energy on doing that. So if it's waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, then I'll make sure that I get up in the morning. If it's not having sugar in the morning, like now, for example, I don't have any sugar in my house since I moved here. And that helps me to not even have to think about it. So I structure my life to help me to stick to these things that I've planned.
Don't you have an emergency cupboard?
I probably would.
Sugar cupboard.
This is the thing, as soon as I have guests or when my son has been visiting, then I've got biscuits and sweets, and it's kind of, should I throw them away?
For the kids.
That's the thing. So, and is that an unconscious behavior?
Sounds like it, mate.
To a degree, I would say, but it's also, I want to make sure that my son is comfortable and happy to be here. But at the same time, then it means I have to use a lot more willpower to make sure that I don't fall into these, and I would say destructive patterns, because I know I do have a much better life when I follow my routines. So that's I don't think they're detrimental, but they're definitely things that I don't feel good about after having done.
I love what you're saying, because I'm a big believer of the 5 a.m. club and getting up early, and that hour and a half, 2 hours of silence where you can action a handful of things. In the 5 a.m. club, they talk about move, reflect, and grow with it. 20. I'm trying to think. Oh gosh, who wrote that? Sharma.
Oh no.
What's his first? Robin Sharma.
Wasn't he the monk with the Ferrari?
Yeah. So he wrote the same book.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah. But it made so much sense to me, this whole having that routine, and that's what you're talking about there, having routine, structure, process. And with the whole moving in that early morning period, it releases BDNF and dopamine, which then sets up your day. You just need to create a little bit of sweat, do a bit of reading, a bit of silence, start your day doing some tasks, so you become task orientated, so then tasks throughout the day aren't as difficult to execute. I loved what you were saying, because I recently for about 12 months, 18 months, I had it down to an absolute T, my morning routine and evening routine. And as soon as I go a little bit off point, those things go, and I become a completely different person. And it's actually super basic. You just need to go back to it. And that's so obvious in many different things. Just go back to basics, or go back to what you know in terms of that pattern recognition, etc. But it's you're absolutely right. Ed, can you give an example of what you've done in terms of self-sabotage? And
yeah, I can. So I think for me the awareness of when I'm self-sabotaging started to become more apparent when I started to think about the reasons why certain things had happened in my life. And a lot of that ability to know when you're self-sabotaging, I think, came through understanding my behaviors through therapy, post-divorce, post a family bereavement, post-redundancy, and thinking about myself and how I'd got to that particular point and why certain patterns of my life and behaviors had led me to make certain choices. Now, there wasn't any particular great addiction or self-sabotaging kind of, I binge drank. And I think recognizing, and I addressed that in therapy because I was actually drinking a lot, because I thought it was part of what my job was. I thought it was part of what I deserved. I was working in London, and it was unconscious behavior of just like everybody's doing it, I deserve it, I'm a bit stressed, and it's kind of work. And actually, I probably, like a lot of people, wasted a lot of time being hungover, making bad choices, disrespecting my partner, my wife, and other partners, I guess, before that, and actually disrespecting myself. And when I did the work on myself and realized and that created a lot of issues in not only in relationships, but how I was fathering that time, my temper, my ability to perform at work. And through the sort of age post those events, I also became very aware of time and what success and purpose were to me. And you don't want to waste your time. So therefore I get very frustrated when I waste time, and you waste time when you're not functioning properly. So I've hopefully developed a bit more discipline now. And when I recognize that I still go out and have a late night, and I enjoy that, and I love socializing. But I'm very hard on myself, probably too hard on myself. And I think essentially, if I get into a pattern of that again, and we've talked about that, if you get into a pattern of repetitive going out for whatever reason you're doing it, that takes me right back to my 30s. And therefore the alarm bells start ringing. What am I doing here? And so a lot of it is around, I don't want to be the guy that I was. And therefore, when I recognize patterns of behavior, I know it's not good for me. I know I become irritable. I know I become tired. I know I put weight on. I can't go to the gym. I'm pretty shit at work. And so self-sabotage, there's nothing wrong with having a knees up, as my parents would say, right? There's nothing, this is not about abstaining from every bar of chocolate and every glass of wine. And we all, I know you guys quite well, we all like a glass of wine, and we like, but it's about recognizing when it's enough. And I'm very hard on myself. And I think that's a pattern that a lot of people feel when they indulge in things, when they get so regimented around what we should be doing, because we don't want to make the same mistakes, that we do it, and then we feel we beat ourselves up about it.
Up in there, I think it's a case of knowing your own patterns, isn't it? And I know, for example, one of my patterns is I love sugar. So if you give me sweets and I get started on it, I'm going to finish it. It's not even a question. So, and if you ask my colleagues at work, they'll tell you that if there's a packet of sweets at work, I'm going for it. So one of my strategies to avoid that pattern, which I know I have, is to not have them in the first place. And that works for me.
Yeah.
And it's just, understanding what your patterns are and understanding how you can break your patterns to keep you in the routines that you would love.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me ask Mark a question in terms of, if someone is listening to this, which is the purpose, is to be helpful, how would you address somebody who's worried about whether they think they're self-sabotaging? How do they know they're doing it? What are the signals? What can they do about it?
Well, I would get a piece of paper out and I would write it down. And I'd write it down what the action you think, or what it is, what's the behavior, what do you believe you're doing, how it's
causing you,
that's causing you to question, question whether you're self-sabotaging or not, how often you're doing it, what's the trigger, what is happening for you to go and do that action. So in Atomic Habits, James Clear, he talks a lot about pattern recognition, realizing that life is habits, right? Life is understanding what the trigger is, the feeling in between the trigger, and then actually taking an action on the trigger, and that type of thing, and then ultimately what usually the reward is. Okay? And it's so I'd get a piece of paper out, I'd write it down, and deconstruct it.
Yeah,
I'd write it down and deconstruct it. But
people that are going through, I mean, again, why would you get the paper in the first place? Before you write it down, you know you've got a problem, because something is making you feel.
Definitely. So for me, change, so I can only voice a view based on my own experience. And for me, it was a case of the Japanese refer to it as a kensho moment. So we grow through pain. And going through, I don't believe I had a, for regular listeners of the podcast.
To Mark's fun. To Mark's fun and Dad.
They will know that I had a very loving childhood, but I did experience a huge amount of adversity. So to then, in my late 20s to go, or early 30s to go through divorce, being arrested for drink driving, and realizing that I was regularly involved in substance abuse, experiencing that pain, that adversity, you grow, that kensho moment.
Yeah.
So you automatically grow. And I think that once I realized that you start consuming some content, that you follow certain people on influencers on Instagram, you start listening. And
do you think everybody needs that kensho moment to make some change?
Do you know what, that is awesome question. So I don't know is the answer, because ultimately three of us are sat here right now. Would we have changed? Isn't that the point? It sounds like Winston's not perhaps hasn't self-sabotaged in terms of binge drinking and drug abuse and in a poor. It sounds like he's got a relatively poor relationship with sugar and eating.
Yeah.
So this is a huge conversation for me in terms of the sugar and eating thing. We'll feels like we're bouncing around a little bit, but the sugar and eating thing, my understanding is that it comes from evolution in terms of the sugar. You'd go out and hunt, and then you'd come across a sugar cane, and people would try it, and they'd love it so much that they'd eat as much as they can in that time, because they never knew when they were going to have it again. And then we brought up, not sure if it was the same for you, Winston, but we've touched on this before, that my parents, grandparents, as children, we were rewarded with sugar. It then becomes
as a treat,
and it then becomes an addiction. So you have high levels of sugar throughout your childhood, your teenage years. You then get exposed to alcohol, which is sugar, and your body craves it. Your body craves the sugar, and it is a horrible, horrible feeling when you don't give it to your body.
Yeah.
Would you say you're a sugar addict, Winston? That's a serious question, and it's not meant to.
I'd probably say yes, to be honest. I have sugar when I don't need it. When I'm really conscious of what I'm doing, like for example, I know after I've had a good meal, I don't have any cravings for sugar whatsoever. So I know it has something to do with being hungry. That's definitely part of it. But what you was mentioning there, Mark, is, as with children, if you start associating sugar with good feelings and rewards, and every time something good has happened, I get some sugar. So when you have bad moments in your life, you're going to reach out for that thing that has all these good feelings associated with it. And that's where, in my so my ex's, Marcus's mother, they always had access to sugar. It was never an issue. So it never had, and I think this is the reason they don't have a problem with it, because it never had any association with negative or positive. It was just sweets. They were just available. So, compared to a lot of people I know who have this idea of sugar is, especially a lot of people who may be going through depression and eat to kind of fight the depression.
Absolutely, yeah.
People who've not had any negative or positive relation to sugar, they don't use it in that way. They maybe have other things that they will self-sabotage with, if that's what they're going to do. So that was a really interesting point about how we're raised as children.
Definitely, and this seems very relevant in terms of eating for comfort and for happiness is a form of self-sabotage. I know that when I'm feeling a bit sad, I will either drink excessively or have drunk excessively, or eat. And my understanding is that 95% of serotonin, the happiness drug, the neurochemical, is created in the gut. So regardless of what I eat, you feel happy. And that's why, again, parents, grandparents, they feed you and feed you and feed you. They're coming from a place of love because it makes you happy, with actually not being conscious of what was going into the body. Does that all make, sense?
It does. And the elephant in the room, literally, is not Winston, but it could have been. But the reality is, I mean, if you look at sugar, eating sugar, why is sugar bad for you? I think most scientific appraisals of it would suggest that eating excessive sugar is bad for the human body, either through excess weight or through cardiovascular disease. Kills 170,000 people in the UK every year. It's not great for general well-being and fitness, and it leads to diabetes and hypertension and diabetes. So if you believe the science, which I think most people do, you can classify sugar as a drug. I think I would put my neck on the line and suggest that. And it also is an addictive substance that people crave to make themselves feel better. So again, like alcohol, like drugs, like any form of behavior, you can take the view, well, actually, we all like a pudding, right? We justify, well, I don't actually, but we can say, well, actually, what's wrong with having a pudding or a bar of chocolate occasionally? Like,
there's nothing wrong with it.
No, exactly. So I think again, you can drink sugar, you can drink alcohol, you can lie in bed all day watching Netflix. It's when the behaviors, and you can include things like porn in that. You can overworking can be a self-sabotaging. You can distance yourself from people that you love because you're in an emotional state of flux and turmoil. So I think back to you, Mark, the question is, for people that feel that their behaviors are causing them negative results, you said you don't know if you need a moment. How do people address then, I think is and again, Mark's putting out, but how do they address that they feel something is becoming a negative ailment in their life or element in their life?
I would
before it gets to,
from listening to this conversation, the big thing that's jumping out at me is this escape from reality, in that you feel that you're not enough, and your relationships with, whether it's your wife or your mum and dad or brother and sister or colleagues, is not at the level it should be. Your mental chatter is all over the place, and it's a short-term escape from reality.
But that which is common to every human being.
Absolutely, and it's a case of realizing that. It's realizing that these that excessive, define excessive, right? So I would Monday to Thursday, no alcohol, diet on point, gym on point. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, go for it.
Yeah.
Without any thought of what I was doing.
Yes.
Because you're in this culturescape, and it's seen as let's go out, and it's seen as connecting with humans, and it's seen as a reward. And it's a complete BS. It is. I genuinely believe.
But that takes you on to the question of people going out on a Thursday and Friday. I get to Friday 4:00, I'm like, oh my god, I need to go out.
Yeah.
Is it because we want connection with people?
So I believe it's a couple of things. One is subconscious behavior, because you've done it for 20 years. So the body craves those things, that especially that stimulation at that point of the week, because it's used to it. It's pattern recognition,
right?
Okay,
yeah.
We are what we consistently do. So you don't do something that you did every week for the last.
So you are hardwired to do those things.
Definitely. So it's about this is why change is so hard, because it's about there's an element of neuroplasticity here. It's a case of how long does it take to rebuild a habit. It's also about shifting your identity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone around you is doing the same thing.
Correct.
Right. So you've got to break that. You've got to break the way you're. I mean, I get your view on this, Winston, because this is probably something.
You're the pro.
You're the professional about this. So take the floor.
Well, it's definitely something that I work with, and so every time we keep mentioning pattern, it's making me think of a book called The Games We Play, I think it's called, or Games People Play. And what is it's about transaction analysis. It's about the way we communicate to each other. It talks about these patterns, and one of the patterns is the idea of the alcoholic. I can't remember if he calls it the alcoholic in the book, but what it is, there is a pattern where you have a good time, then there's some negative feelings, and so you drink to get rid of the negative feelings. Then somebody comes and rescues you and helps you get out of this this alcoholic phase that you're in. You go to AA Anonymous, everything starts to go well for you again, and then you have another dip. And when you look at somebody after years of their behavior, you start to find that there is this pattern where they're literally just going around in a circle. And like you were saying, Mark, if you start repeating that enough, it becomes your routine, it becomes what you're used to. And so trying to break that cycle can be a nightmare. And
it's so hard. It's so hard. Right? And that's why most people don't change, because of the conversation that you're having internally about this is too hard.
Well, also a lot of people have a codependent structure where there is no reason to change, because the people around them are not, they either have not had that moment, or surrounded in an environment where this is normal behavior. So it's even harder to escape that.
Culture skill.
Yeah. I think there's two ways out of it. Very basically put, there's two ways out of it. One of it is the people who are involved in your pattern, because it's not normally a pattern you do by yourself. There's going to be family members or authorities or police or other people involved who are going to help you in this pattern. So one of the ways is that those people who are enabling it, even if they don't realize they are, when they do realize what's going on, if they stop enabling the behavior, that's one way to break the pattern. Another way for you to break it yourself is, for example, now I've just moved apartment. So I know when you make big changes in your life, when you get married, when you have children, when you get divorced, when you moving is actually one of the big ones. As soon as you've changed something major in your life, that is the perfect time to make changes in your life. It's just your brain is open to change. And I see this in my job. When we get somebody new in, a new resident, and everywhere they've been in the past, it just hasn't been successful. When they come to us and suddenly it's a new structure, it's new people, it's a new area they live in, I know that is the time where we can make the biggest difference, is within those first few weeks that they're with us. And it's so clear, it's so obvious, it happens every time. And we know this to be true. When you have big changes in your life, that's when you can start changing your patterns.
See, I love that. And I believe that could be linked to the whole Kensho moment, is that you're forced to change. You are forced to change, so then you become open to change. You probably developed a form of a growth mindset. So suddenly, and through change comes transformation. So the Japanese term is satori, where you start growing through insight. And ultimately, that's what we're doing by consuming content, reading books. You're then growing. You're not standing still. You're continually evolving. You're living a life of learning, right?
Yeah.
And I find that is absolutely a point. So in terms of change, then we're encouraging people to be open to change. I think that, Ed, your question is a hard one, isn't it? Because we can only voice what it was like for us, and this something happens, this adversity happens, and you do, and Winston's absolutely hit the nail on the head there, that you become open to
self-analysis.
Absolutely, and I would encourage people to. I'm not sure whose quote it is, but you're a reflection of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that would be a really great point, is that if this is the status quo, and this is where you are now, and you realize that you feel to change, you don't know how to, reflect on who you spend the most time with and what their vision for the future is, and whether their behaviors are ultimately can be defined as instant gratification. And because I used this quote in a previous episode, but Will Smith talks about happiness over pleasure. And that instant gratification is usually pleasure, short-term instant gratification. But that's not true. That's not true happiness. These points that we're talking about, the eating, the binge eating, the binge drinking, the drug abuse, these are all short-term fixes to root problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And I think just to add to that, I mean, I think the ability to assess where you are on a regular basis in terms of your own personal vision or your journey, your purpose, it's only if you give some time to yourself to sit down on your own with your family, partners, friends, and be honest with yourself about, are you doing the things? Are you living your life with purpose and passion? Are you reaching you're a goals orientated coach, for instance. So generally, and my dad says it to me all the time, you need some purpose. And when people are listless, that's usually when bad behaviors come. And so having that purpose, whether it's good relationships,
Definitely.
whether it's
Fantastic.
whether it's business, whether it's being a good dad, like we touched on last week, once you've got an anchor of values and purpose, and once you kind of know where you're trying to get to, you know, you're not going to do things that hopefully sabotage those, because they're deep rooted in who you are. And the fact is, you will always make mistakes. We'll always have a one too many, unless you go sober, right? And that's another discussion we can have in itself. But this is not. It's not, for me. It's not about complete abstinence. It's about management. That I'm not wasting my time, and I'm trying to use my time to reach those values and purpose. And I think people ultimately are, if they're feeling like their life is not where they want it to be, usually they're self-sabotaging it, in whether it's relationships or with substances or staying in bed all day or not working out. So I think if you align yourself to being brutally honest with what you want to spend your time on earth doing, because it's the only commodity, then you can address the things that are not helping you get there.
Definitely. What I heard there, this whole man's search for meaning. Viktor Frankl wrote a brilliant book of the experience in the Holocaust, and it's, once you have a vision for your future, you can then build your values based on that vision, which then creates daily, small, consistent actions, and you can then analyze your daily behaviors in line with those actions and that vision. And it makes a lot of sense. I know that for 10, 15 years, I did not have that. Correct. I was living hand to mouth, month to month.
Well, Monday to Friday, Friday to Sunday.
Absolutely.
I think as soon as you know, and this is why I always say to my clients and to my family and friends, even my son actually, even though he's so young, is, well, how do you want your life to look in the future? When you can start to envision how your life is going to look in the future, then everything you're doing along the way, you can ask yourself the question, is this bringing me closer or further away? And so when we're talking about how do you know if you're self-sabotaging? Well, is that behavior getting you closer to where you want to be? And if it's not, then that's where you should have a question mark. Should I continue doing this? And that for me is how I make decisions about what I'm doing. So right now, just to give an example, I don't have a car at the moment, and I want to get a car soon. And I got everyone around me, my colleagues and everyone, like, you're taking public transport. And I'm like, yeah. And it's kind of because I've got a dream, I've got a vision of where I want to be within the next 18 months. And I know that vision means that I need to spend as little money as possible for the next few months. And when you start calculating how much a car costs, then, is that going to get me closer to my goal or further away? And am I prepared to pay that price? That's the same for me with sugar. Like, is sugar helping me to stabilize my mood? I like to have a nice stable mood. Is that helping me? No, it's not. So when I'm doing it too much, okay, well, that's taking me away from where I want to be. So have a vision of where you want to be, and analyze, make an audit of the way you're behaving, and see if that's taking you further away or closer to it.
Right. Fantastic.
I absolutely love that. We talk about, does it serve you? Right. It's ask, does it serve you? Is it in line with where you want to be?
Winston, I've got another question for you, just following on a bit. If you're in an environment at home or at work or with your friends where you are kind of feeling pressure and guilt to not be yourself, where if you're developing in a way, how do you face that, and how do you take steps forward on that?
I think I would say within the last 5 years, I have just created a really, really hard skin. And I kind of just do whatever I feel is right for me. Previously, I think I was more easily dissuaded from where I wanted to be. So I would probably go out that day when I said I didn't want to go out. I might skip the gym that time when I knew I should have been at the gym that day, most importantly. Whereas now I'm just kind of, and it can seem very cold, and it can seem maybe make me a bit distant sometimes, but I'm just like, I have decided this is what I'm going to do, and there's very little that's going to stand in the way of that.
That's incredible. Just go on a bit with that. So that ability to say no because it doesn't suit you. How do you develop that? Because a lot of people, I think, and I used to do that. I never want to be the person that says no, I can't go to that, and it's a terrible characteristic to have. And it actually is. It's quite tormenting, I think, to not say no.
It was a really good question. I think one of the things, I don't know specifically, I'd have to actually really think about that, but I know one of the things that is part of it. Is, and I tell this because I've said this to a few people recently who are very sensitive people, very compassionate people who are always doing things for others, because that used to be me, is to remember myself. Yeah. And I think if you start placing your values, your dreams, the things you want to do as important as everyone else, then when somebody asks you to do something that maybe doesn't fit into your goal, it's going to be easier for you to say, yeah, but that doesn't, what is the cost of me doing this thing that could be fun for a moment?
Yeah.
How's it going to be in 2 days?
And that whole kind of why are some people pleasers? Why are people struggling with boundaries? Why are people empaths and people are more narcissistically or more controlling or more dominant? And then you're going down that whole sort of debate. But essentially, I think we'd all suggest you have to know when to say no. And you have to maybe do it in a way that is, look, the way that I try and do it is, look, I'm going to struggle with this. I'm struggling a bit. I'm a bit overwhelmed. I just can't do it. And all my close friends and family will go, it's fine, Ed, we get it. Right. But it's all in your head. You know, I don't want to let people down, because if I let them down, they're going to let me down, and I'm not a good friend, or I'm not a good. And actually, it's not the way really relationships shouldn't be based on feeling guilty if you don't do something. And I think a lot of relationships are, right. It's like, and that's the dynamic. So you need to maybe think about why those relationships are like, is it all in my head, your head?
Well, just a quick comment that, Ed, if someone's making you feel bad for doing something that's good for you, then you really want to put a question mark on that relationship.
Absolutely.
That's very common, absolutely. Isn't it? Very common.
I love what Winston was saying, because I felt like
we'll be back after the break. Take a short break there.
Is there a... do you need the toilet?
No, let's go on. It's getting quite exciting.
There was a chance for a little sponsor to go in there.
Sponsored by Serene.
It felt like I could relate to it, because I realized that I needed to prioritize 3 things, right? Number 1 being myself, and 2 being the business, so creating financial freedom, and then 3, Zach and Charlie. The reason why Zach and Charlie are down at 3 is because I don't have them all the time. I have them 33% of the time. So they can't be a priority. They cannot be a priority. And Eric Thomas talks about, I don't hate you, but I love me. And that, to me, when I heard that, and if anyone who hasn't consumed his content, great motivational speaker. It's just very eye-opening. And on that note, I'd encourage you to go and follow us. If you are looking for some insight, I'd encourage you to go and follow as many influencers as possible on Instagram. Remove any sort of negativity from your newsfeed, just so you're not seeing these types of things. But this whole concept of, I don't hate you, I love me, and the fact that you are the priority. Everything. There's a brilliant quote, Jim Quick, that which I remember daily, and it's, if an egg breaks through an external force, life ends. But if an egg breaks through an internal force, life begins. All great things start within. And those two little bits of insight there, John, you can feel the energy and the power talking about it. It has to start with you. So, and it's hard, right? We're talking about self-sabotage around eating and drinking, etc. We still find this a challenge. Changing behavior, changing that subconscious behavior.
Well, let's just explore that. Difficult. Yeah, let's just great. I mean, let's just explore that with alcohol, because it's something that I guess we've all had relationships with, and a lot of men. And this is a men's community. A lot of men, like I'm going to the pub with my mates, and when and it's such an interesting discussion about, is it good for you because it enables men to have a conversation, because the defenses are lowered and people become more open and emotional, and maybe that's a positive thing. And at the same time, why do you have to do that? Why do you need to have 7 pints of lager to be able to have a conversation? And I think I'm kind of more in that camp than I am with it's good for me. And so, a lot of men self-sabotage around the pub and drinking. And I'm not saying all men, but a lot of men do. And it's exactly what I did for 20 years of my life. Yeah. Excessive use of alcohol to restrict uncomfortable emotions that I was not facing and addressing, and ultimately pretending it, or in my mind being addicted to believing I'm having a good time, fueled by sugar and alcohol, ultimately leading to self-loathing, which used to be a day when I was 20 and is now about a week now I'm 48. So I know it doesn't do me any good, and I know it's not done me any good. I mean, I can look back and go, God, I've had some bloody good nights, right? But how many bad mornings have I had? Yeah. And I think you have to go through it. But I always I think, why keep doing the same thing? It's the definition of madness. You keep making the same mistakes is the definition of madness. And I don't think ultimately now it's serving me on balance.
Ed, what's your relationship like with alcohol now, and what are you doing to change your identity with alcohol, the relationship?
Not buying as much. I don't drink at home. That's one thing. I still, when I go out, I now try and have a non-alcoholic beer, which I went to a black tie dinner on Thursday. Actually, had 3 non-alcoholic beers before I had a glass of wine. I was incredibly proud of myself, and felt really good. I had 2 glasses of water when I got home. Had to get up because I nearly wet the bed at about 3 o'clock in the morning. but now I'm conscious. I'm conscious of hydration. I'm conscious of taking stuff. I would love to be in a position, I've said this to you, where I can go out and not drink. And I want to take steps, but actually what I'm trying to do at the moment is limit the social environments that I'm in that involve alcohol. If I do need to go out, I will limit myself, and I will organise. Now I will try and organise a cab home before I go. I don't want to be the last guy at the bar, which I always was, thinking I'm having a good time, just getting more and more hammered, right? Because it's just, I know that's my personality. I know that once I go for it, it's like, this is it. We're gonna have a great night, and that involves a 4 o'clock finish, and walking home from London. Yeah, and that's in my brain. So I know I'm I mean, back at you. How do you manage your relationship with alcohol, or any other drug for that matter?
Well, in a really tough way. I think once you realise that it is an escape, I think sobriety is a really interesting conversation, because there are people like Matt Pink on Instagram, and there are others as well that talk about the fact that completely removing it. For me, this goes back to what you were saying, Ed. It's about control. It's about awareness. It's about conscious. It's about having the discipline, like Winston was saying, to say no, and not just no to somebody else, but no to yourself and that subconscious, that whole gorilla or the whole chimp paradox, etc. I think non-alcoholic beer is a brilliant concept, because it's most of this is psychological. And I found from my experiences that if you're even just a simple change from beer to non-alcoholic beer, it's that whole placebo effect, isn't it? This is cold. This tastes the same. I'm drinking it. I feel sociable.
But I mean, I would consider myself an alcoholic. That's quite a strong statement. But I think the fact that I struggle to go out in a social environment, to a pub or a bar, if I can't do that 10 times and not have a drink, that means I'm dependent and addicted to alcohol. Now, I may not be opening a bottle of vodka in the morning 5 to 7 days a week, but any circumstance where you are dependent on something means you're addicted to it. I mean, I'm pretty harsh about that. Therefore, I have the tendencies of alcoholism.
I think that's the way. That's the same reason I say I'm addicted to sugar. If I need to put structures in place in my life to stop me from automatically doing it, then I see it as an addiction. It's the same when you've put Facebook and you've got used to clicking in to get into Facebook on your phone. It's become an addiction, and you have to do something like deleting the app or whatever it is. That's an addiction.
Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with saying that you're an alcoholic, right? This is the point. It doesn't mean that you are defining yourself as somebody. Everyone, I think we all have these ideas that if you are addicted to something, it means that you have completely lost control of your life.
And there's something wrong.
And there's something wrong with you. And it's not wrong with you. It's your behavior with that substance. And it's the substance that's wrong. It's not you as a person. And it's a fascinating, we could go for hours on this, but
it's an absolutely fascinating topic. And I had struggled with gambling for 15 years, right? And I just didn't understand why I was repeating the behavior. Once you then look into the neuroscience around it, and then what you're missing in your real life, so you then go and replicate that. I think we touched on it previously with gaming in a different episode, and it makes so much sense. And I would encourage anybody who is interested about behaviors and pattern recognition to look into neuroscience, understand neuroplasticity, understand that we do actually have the ability to recode and reconfigure those behaviors and ultimately remove them completely, but it takes time. And that's the bit that's so hard. And that's the bit where I'd encourage you to surround yourself with like-minded individuals, people that will hold you accountable. Be vulnerable. We talk a lot about authenticity and vulnerability. Go and be vulnerable. Go and tell somebody that, like, I might be struggling with this. Can I talk to you about it? Not somebody who's already in that culture state and is doing the same behaviour.
So if men out there or women are listening to this and they're going, literally, I don't fit, who could I go and say this to? And a lot of people will break out in hives just being told to go and tell someone they've got a problem with something, because a lot of people do not have that kind of confidence that they're going to be heard.
Ed, you're absolutely right.
So where would you go? If you know you want some help, how do you get professional help?
You get professional help. You speak to somebody in your circle or your network, whether it's your first connections or second connections. Speak to someone that you know has been through it and gain their insight. Right?
Yeah.
The reality is that how already exists. Every problem that we're struggling with, somebody else has already been through it. 99% of the time. You've got 3 men here that are openly talking about these struggles with nutrition and drinking, etc., and gambling. Reach out to us. We had a situation. So we get contacted by either random people or people in our network on a weekly basis. And we had that one situation a couple of months back where somebody reached out to us and they said, I want to change. I know that I'm struggling with something, but I don't know how. And I can't talk to my friends about it because they're doing the same thing and they're telling me that there's something wrong with me. You're
losing it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Have another pint.
You big.
And that's not that is not the solution.
Yeah,
it is not the solution. And this is coming from I'm speaking for all of us, which I probably shouldn't do, but this is coming from someone who used to think like that. In that, my mum mentioned something which was extraordinary the other day in terms of, I was talking to her about how to change my relationship with alcohol. Whenever I go and visit her, they've got non-alcoholic beers now. And before it would be, you'd go there, you'd plow into the wine, you'd have a few beers, then maybe a whiskey or a port would come out, and you'd end up just falling asleep at like 10 o'clock, or you become grumpy towards those individuals, and etc. But she made a really interesting point. She went, you know what? It was you that introduced us to alcohol. Our family didn't drink. You went and sat in a rugby environment for a number of years, and for anyone, and we're rugby players here, we've enjoyed that social element. It's a bizarre concept that you go to these sports clubs that are designed around health and well-being and movement. You drink excessively, and
it's an achievement to do that.
Absolutely, you're drinking 10 and 15 pints, and the behaviours are questionable.
Yeah,
absolutely questionable.
I agree.
And I'm sure I really hit home when she said that, because I was like, Mum, you're right. You're absolutely right. I would then. I married into a family that was it's a heavily drinking culture in their environment, where they would sit down on Sundays and they would have a roast and they would drink most evenings. And I was like, oh, and you this is new. You start joining in. This feels good. Everyone would get together, inhibitions would go down, everyone would have a laugh, etc. You think, oh my God, in the moment, this feels great.
Yeah.
The next day, you feel hungover, you don't really remember what the conversations had. No, question to both of you, how many times have you been out with the guys, drunk excessively, had some deep and meaningful conversations, and then never brought it up again? Until the next time it happens.
Yeah.
I used to work as a bouncer here in Denmark, and so I've a lot of people in the nightclubs have told me their life stories and problems they're dealing with and all kinds of things. And then when I meet them randomly in town, just completely stoned, like almost like they don't know me, and I'm like, I know so much about you.
Isn't
I
that
forgot.
that is fascinating? That is absolutely fascinating. It's not real connection.
Incredible.
It's not real connection. I was forgive me for interrupting you.
No,
I looked at Facebook earlier, and the Christmas parties at the moment, where you see mates getting together in the pub, and they're all talking about this love for one another after 4 or 5 pints. It's like, how deep is that connection? Because I was that person, and I didn't know any of them. As in, you genuinely didn't have a deep and meaningful conversation. I believe a relationship built on alcohol, I would question the strength of that relationship, and I'd question, and the same with the relationship as well.
Yeah,
and it is absolutely fascinating. For me, summarizing, I suppose there were the key takeaways for me was that we've touched on 3 forms of self-sabotage, maybe 4, that are prevalent, like quite common for people around nutrition, as in what you're consuming and the consciousness of that, alcohol, drugs, and gambling, and gambling addictions. And
I'd probably add emotional behaviors that I mentioned at the outset, in terms of not being comfortable and therefore creating negative situations because you're not able to create positive ones. And so I think I'd like to add that as a 5th. So it's just poor emotional management, poor communication skills, and self-sabotaging relationships, because you need to create an environment where you can broach things but it's done from a negative space and not a positive one. So that's, I mean, if I may, but that maybe we could.
That's the one we'll talk about more detail, because it feels like we didn't dig deep into that one, and it's an important one. You're absolutely right. So it feels like we can talk about that one in a bit more detail. Winston, what's your sort of number 1 rule for you? So we talked a lot about taking responsibility for ourselves. So what is your number 1 rule for behavioral awareness?
So my number 1 rule for behavioral awareness is, again, like you said before, Ed, I'm very much focused on goals, and I realized that quite a while back that goals are, I need goals to if I go to the gym without something I'm aiming towards, it's just a waste of time. And I found that's the same with all of my life, and that helps me to figure out if what I'm doing, the behavior I'm having, is helping me get towards this goal. And that's how I judge everything in my life, really. Even relationships. Is this person good for me? Is this behavior good for me? That's how I judge everything in my life. And also, I do turn it around for the people that are very important to me. Am I good for this person? Is my behavior helping? For example, with my son, when I treat him like this, is that helping him? Am I encouraging him in the direction that I would want to go in, or I would want him to go in? Is it going to be good for him in the future? That's how I'm looking into, my behaviors.
Boys, we're recording a podcast. Don't take so much, please.
That's probably a time to go.
That's probably the time. Let's go get the Christmas tree.
So for you, the question for Mark, and I guess just.
What was the question then?
Actually, so what I've got here is the book that I was talking about. I don't know if you guys can see it. Games people play, and it talks about the different patterns. And when I'm trying to help people with self-sabotaging, that's one of the things I look at, is what are they doing repeatedly? And that helps me to understand, helps them to understand what it is that they're doing, what kind of behaviors they're having that are not beneficial for them. Maybe they're actually fine. Maybe they're not beneficial, but it's just understanding the patterns that you have, the way you behave. And so my question to you, Mark, is, having gone through what you've been through, and also to you, Ed, what would you recommend for someone to become more aware of what they're doing? Is there a book? Is there a particular place that they can go to get advice about what they're doing?
Hey, would you like to go first? Because I'd like to give it some thought before I answer.
Yeah, he was breathing deeply. I think you don't know what you don't know, which we say a lot. And ultimately, I think to examine your own, as you said, to examine where you would like to get to have a think about patterns of behavior that you're doing that you, in your gut, feel are not serving you. And ultimately then, and writing that down in terms of, it's not really working for me anymore. And then the actions are, do I elevate myself above the people I'm spending time with, meeting new people, and addressing those behaviors and patterns to make a difference. And
probably getting some kind of professional help if required. And don't lay that onto your friends and family who are maybe not equipped to deal with it. So I totally want to dispel the taboo of using professionals if required. And also, I just last thing for me is, we're all cliched, we're all works in progress. We all make mistakes. We're not seeking perfection here. We're not wandering around with halos, attempting to be perfect men. We're all flawed, and I think self-sabotage will happen at different points in your life. And it's the ability is to address it and be aware of it, not to accept that it's never going to happen, because it is throughout our lives. So that I'll finish on that. But
you touched on it earlier, and it was towards the beginning of the conversation. This is very much about awareness of those behaviours, because ultimately it's more than likely, because it did for us, they affected the relationships that we had at work, at home, the kids, the wife, mum and dad, brothers and sisters. So this is that, again, Winston was talking about goals. The goal here is to identify these behaviors in order to improve your connection with the people that you care the most about. Because from what from the research and the science and from my own experience, doing those things did not
work first time,
but did not help. It did not help at all in terms of actually forming real, genuine human connection. Winston, it's a really good question. I can't think of one specific bit of content or a book to obviously follow the Blue Mind, because I think
we can put some books on the website once it's up end of the year. We can put them on the podcast, and we'll have a book repository for stuff we recommend. So I think that's the way forward for next year. So that's
But for anyone listening, thinking of challenging the status quo around the culture escape that they're in, leave nothing important unsaid. Go and speak to someone that you know that has maybe been through it, gain some insight from them, or reach out to us. We'd love to. That's why we're doing this. We absolutely love to accelerate the healing process for others and drive change and shift people's identity.
Well said, Mark. Very well said.
Thanks, Ed.
I mean, we don't need to say anything else on that, though, do we? I think, apart from like your IKEA plant in the background, for instance. I have this very same pot on your. Anyway, dude, I think that's. Dude, have you got anything to add? I'm conscious you probably need to get off and speak to Marcus, so as we do.
No, I don't have anything particular. I think it's just I'll just be repeating myself if I had anything more.
Awesome. Winston, so good to see you, buddy. The new place looks great. Catch up again with you soon, guys.
Take care.